Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in, much appreciated. And actually, I'm out here in the tackle room. I just got back from the first day at the Bassmaster Open at Grand. It's about 10:30 at night. Got to get today's video out because I got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive back down to Grand and hopefully make a good comeback on day two and hopefully make that cut if I can get me about 17 pounds today. But today's tip I want to give you guys, it was a lot of it based upon how I caught my fish yesterday at Grand, which was I caught quite a few fish around some boat docks yesterday. And I want to talk about how to fish boat docks in the fall time of year, sort of give you guys some tips, understand, different ways to catch them on that. So one of the things about docks you have to consider here, there's basically three types of docks, in my opinion. There's the pier type docks, that you have like back east a lot, where you've got actually like telephone poles in the water that create the piers for the dock. Then you have floating residential docks like we have here in Missouri, where they're actually docks with a walkway that are supported by floats underneath. Then you usually have one or two slips in it, residential docks. And then you have commercial boat docks, which are floating docks that house, lots of boats. But specifically, I want to talk about residential floating docks and piers in the fall time of the year. So let's talk about pier docks first of all. Pier docks, a lot of it in the fall time of the year depends on the angle of the bank that you have. And one of the things that I like to look for on docks, on pier docks in the fall time of the year, is I prefer the docks that are on flatter, shallower banks. Now, in the summertime of the year or when it's winter, I like those deeper docks on the main lake. But in the fall time of the year, I try to go back into the creeks and coves and get on the flat banks. And I want to target those pier docks that have no more than like 6 or 7 feet of water on the outside part of them. And for some reason, the bass will use these docks a lot more. You got a lot of shad in these type of areas. The bass will use actually every piling on the dock. If you've got shallow pilings, a lot of it depends on the water visibility too, but if you got anywhere between a foot to 3 or 4 feet visibility, for example, if you're on the Potomac River fishing pier docks, you may have 6 inches, 12 inches of visibility. If you're fishing Lake Norman pier docks, you may have 5 foot of visibility. But regardless, in the fall time of the year, on those flatter banks, those fish will use every one of those pilings. The big key in the fall time of the year, until that water temperature gets down in the mid 50s, is keen on shade all the time. Pier docks are always better during the mid part of the day when you start having shade lines form on a dock. That'll position those fish around the shade lines. And they'll stay on that shade until the water temperature drops into the low 50s. Then they start using, a mix of the shade and the sun. But one of the big keys on that, guys, is you got to meticulously fish all the pilings on there. Some of the pilings will have a little bit more complex feature to them, like there'll be some pilings tied together. There may be some brush on the pilings, which is really good. But overall, the thing that I want to stress is get on those docks that have the flatter, shallower docks and the coves and the creeks for the piers. Now, if you're fishing residential docks, like residential floating docks, these would be docks like you find on Lake Lanier in Georgia, Lake of the Ozarks, Grand Lake, where I fish today, any type of dock that does not have a pier. These docks can actually be a little bit more difficult to fish because when you're fishing floating docks in the fall time of the year, you've got a couple different populations of fish. You will have some fish that suspend underneath the docks. You'll have some fish that are on the bottom if it's not too deep. And then you'll have some fish using shallow cover like brush and stuff around the docks or some shallow areas around the walkway. The big key, guys, in the fall time of the year I want to give you guys on a floating dock is look for docks that are in some type of off-colored water. And what I like to look for is I try to find not necessarily the dirtiest docks I can find, but I try to find off-colored water where that water visibility is under 3 feet. In the fall time of the year, I find this is extremely, extremely crucial. So have no more than 3 feet of water on the docks that you're fishing. And if you're going to have this, a lot of it depends. You're going to be in the creek arms and the cove arms again, just like we talked about the pier docks. But the way the fish are going to position on this depends on how much water depth you have on the outside of the dock and the water visibility and how much water depth you have on the inside of the dock. If you have water visibility that is anything like over 2 feet and you have the outside parts of the dock that are over 8 feet deep, the fish in the fall time of the year, excuse me, a lot of them are going to be suspended around those docks. They'll be suspended underneath the floats. They'll be suspended inside the stalls, particularly if you have boat lifts in them. And it's getting to be real common now that a lot of floating docks have boat lifts. The key area, guys, in a floating dock in the fall time of the year is to get in those tight nooks and crannies in between the slip wall and the float. And the boat lift. So normally, if you look into a boat slip and you've got your boat sitting up on the boat slip, you'll have about this much of a gap between the wall of the dock and where the boat float starts. And this is the darkest place of the dock, and this is where those fish live, because they're, a lot of times it's very difficult to get to them, because normally on the outside of a boat lift, on the front part of the dock, you have 2 chains coming down in there. So you actually have to make your presentation over those chains. But if you can get in there, you can take like a chatterbait or a swim jig, or maybe even a shallow running crankbait, pitching it back in there and just running it underneath those floats in those areas specifically that have boats sitting on the boat lifts. That's a key deal in the fall, guys. I'm telling you, this is a big secret that a lot of people don't know. Most people, when they're fishing docks, they hit the corners, they hit the sides, they hit whatever is the easiest, brush around the dock. But I'm here to tell you that 75% of the bass that are living on a residential dock are inside of those slips in those tight, dark areas that's difficult to get to. So take your time, don't slop through them. Take some time to get that bait in there. Don't worry about getting hung up. It's extremely difficult to do if the wind's blowing, like at Grand Lake today. That's how I caught my fish, a lot of them. But it was super hard because you had the wind was blowing hard, and you got to really line up on those places to make those casts into those tight nooks. So it was very challenging for me from a casting angle standpoint. So that's the number one thing that I'm looking for on float docks. The second thing you want to pay attention to in the fall time of the year on those float docks is pay close attention to any brush that's on the dock. A lot of times, most of the time, brush is planted around a dock, either on the sides or in the front of the dock. So what I like to do in the fall time of the year is I like to fan cast a medium diving crankbait along the outside edges and the front, and I'm actually looking for brush with that. I guess if you got a live scope, you could see it. I don't have a live scope, but those are the primary placements for it. Also, you can pay attention a lot of times if you see ropes hanging off the dock, that's an indicator there's brush. But my favorite fall time cover on a boat dock is any brush that is underneath the walkway. I will go out of my way to try to hit that brush that's underneath the walkway on a dock in the fall time of the year. Super high percentage area. So anyway, that's just a few tips, what I found that works for me, fall time docks. They're good, all year long, bass live on docks all year long, but they're especially good this time of year in the fall time of the year. Hopefully today I'll go out and catch 17 or 18 pounds off those docks, and I can give you a little bit more tips on it next week or something. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys watching the videos. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll see y'all later.